Netshirian.
Hello and welcome to the cybersecurity Q&A. Today's question, is it worth monitoring workstation logs? Log monitoring is a core cybersecurity task, especially in enterprise IT. And no doubt we already monitor logs from high value assets, such as servers, firewalls, SaaS applications like Google Workspace or Office 365, and from security controls like IDS. But how about workstations? Is monitoring logs from workstations worth it? Some of the objections that I normally hear are all workstations are domain joined, and we're already monitoring the servers. Why bother? Another objection is, hey, look, we're in work from home now. Workstations are all remote. It's quite painful actually to gather the logs. They may have, questionable network. In any case, we already have them on a VPN. So why bother again? And of course, the standard one are SIM vendor charges by the byte or by the endpoint. And when push comes to shove, this is something I'm going to sacrifice. I simply can't afford it. So rather than answer the question in a hard and fast, yes, you always should, or no, you never should, let's look at the risk appetite, right? Value judgments aren't, so helpful. What are those kinds of scenarios that you can really detect only by monitoring workstations logs? And once you know this, you can make an informed decision as to whether it's worth it for you, yes or no. As always, different strokes for different folks. And there is not one fixed, always, never kind of an answer. So first of all, we're talking about traditional workstations that are typically running Windows OS or Mac OS or Linux. We're not talking about Chrome OS because this thing isn't generating logs locally. And this may not apply if you're doing VDI, virtual desktop infrastructure, because then you're launching from an image. And you may or may not for the same reasons that we're going to discuss, but your mileage will vary. So if the workstation is running Windows OS, what are the sorts of things that you can only detect if you monitor local logs? Well, first of all, when did the user actually log off? Surprised? Well, logons, if your domain join, would be detected by the Active Directory machine, but they typically don't get log off. And this might be important because if something happens after the user had physically left, you wouldn't really know. Also, what programs did the user execute locally on the machine? Sometimes this is some information that you would really like to know, especially if the program being executed is malware. Another common one is PowerShell launches locally, and it can, in fact, in turn launch other processes. Favorite tactic of malware attackers. What programs did PowerShell launch? If the machine was offline, then maybe someone tried to access it using stored credentials. Now, you're not going to know this unless you monitor local logs. And then, of course, the hot favorite, if you have removable media such as USB or DVDs, were they inserted into the machine? And if they were inserted, were files copied into the removable media? This is a popular technique for exfiltration. Bottom line, you detect these logs at the workstation, and you'll be able to detect and disrupt attacks faster. What about Mac OS? What can you get by monitoring those local logs? Well, system integrity, log on, log off. Usually, but not always, the Mac OS may not be domain joined, depends upon the environment, in which case you've probably got local log on, log off. User account management, especially if you're handing out privileged accounts like the Halloween candy, then they can create accounts, change passwords. And we've seen plenty of organizations that believe a Mac OS requires no monitoring, no management at all. It pretty much runs itself, so we can hand out the admin passwords to the user. Of course, privileged use, this is sudo. If you've got a Linux workstation, I know there are some of you out there that use this, then of course, please use varlog audit log, and use audit control to watch on all the other stuff. But then you can look for auth.log in Red Hat and CentOS. This is called varlog secure. You're looking for failed logons, brute force kinds of stuff, username, password hijacking, and then of course, new packages being installed via yum. These are some of the kinds of things that you can detect if you're monitoring Linux. So what's the takeaway? Is it worth monitoring workstation logs? Well, I hope you understood that our goal wasn't to necessarily answer that question for you, but to give you information on what are those kinds of things that you can really get if you monitor these logs. By the way, worth mentioning, in some cases, rather than think only about security, possibly you have to get these logs for regulatory compliance. And of course, as you saw today, there are some conditions that you can only detect by monitoring workstation logs. Simply monitoring the servers or the firewalls or your SaaS applications won't give you some of these conditions. Is that worth it? Well, frankly, only you can decide for yourself. If you're already running a tight ship from security standpoint, monitoring workstation logs will further tighten your posture, which means you will detect and disrupt attacks faster, which is why we say YMMV, which is your mileage may vary. Now, if you haven't gotten around to doing the basics, then as they say in Parker Brothers Monopoly, do not pass go, do not collect $200, go to jail, go directly to jail. So first pay attention to monitoring for servers, SaaS network devices, possibly upgrade from that old timey antivirus to modern day EDR, and then come back and you can tighten your procedure with workstation logs. Thank you for your attention. Hope this was useful.
Netshirian.